Welcome back to the Cycle Starters podcast, where we explore the journeys of those who are breaking ancestral patterns and creating new legacies for generations to come. I'm your host, Heather Rebecca Wilson, and today I am thrilled to welcome Marina Nabao to the show. Marina is a somatic experiencing practitioner and spiritual mentor and pleasure activist. Marina works with individuals and couples, specializes in relational somatics, trauma healing, and sexual empowerment. Her approach is truly integrative, weaving together soma, psyche, and spirit while drawing from multiple lineages and staying anchored in somatic reality. Marina works with erotic energy as both medicine and spiritual practice, honoring the body as a vessel of wisdom. Originally from Brazil and now based in Mill Valley, California, Marina lives with her husband, David, their daughter, Isabella, and their rescue dog, Jessie. Her cultural roots, spiritual syncretism, and earth-based wisdom infuse everything she creates. In today's conversation, we'll be exploring Marina's ancestral healing journey, the patterns she's breaking in her own lineages, and the cycles she's starting. And as a special treat, I'll be sharing a mini galactic astrology reading for Marina, looking at some of the very powerful placements in her natal chart. So we will get to that further into the episode. So before we begin, I do have a favor to ask. If you are enjoying the content that we are creating here on the Cycle Starters podcast, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps the algorithm get our episodes in front of more viewers. So I appreciate the support. Thank you in advance for that. And without further ado, let's welcome Marina to the show. Hi, my dear.
Hey, Heather, so good to be here.
Thank you so much for saying yes to being on the show. I'm very excited to be in dialogue with you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's been a good day so far, so excited to sit down at this time.
Okay, good. All
Yeah.
right. Well, let's just jump into it. What can you share with us about your blood ancestors and your blood ancestry?
Well, in 2022, I was already living here, and my in-laws gifted me that ancestry test. It came up in a conversation we were having, and I did it, and not to my surprise, obviously. 21% of my ancestry comes from Portugal, 21% from West Africa, mainly from Bantu people. And then there is a combination of native Brazilian indigenous people, other parts of Europe like Italy, Spain, and other parts of Western Africa. So that speaks a lot about my family. My mom is white from Portuguese descent. My dad was black from African descent. And I do have a grandmother who was native Brazilian. So it was almost like a confirmation of the things that I already knew.
Nice. Okay. Well, so you're very mixed, like me.
Yeah. And like
Okay.
any good Brazilian, we're very
Right.
mixed as a population.
Yes, yes. Brazil definitely has an interesting history, which I'm sure you know much more about than I do. I'm curious, when did this concept of ancestral healing enter your consciousness, insofar as when did you realize, oh, okay, things can be passed down from generation to generation, but also when did you get in your power around having the ability to change these patterns to start new cycles?
Yeah. I think it was a very gradual process for me, to be honest, Heather. What I'm about to say is a difficult thing to say. It's difficult to admit up to this day. The way that I was raised with my mom. My mom and my dad got divorced when my mom was pregnant with me. So I was raised with my mom and my mom's side of the family, which means that I was raised in a white family, even being a mixed race, black identifying person. And it was not until I was in my early 20s that I really realized that I was a black woman in Brazil. I think being raised by the white side of the family because of their own ignorance and denial of racism, these conversations were never brought up to the table with clarity. And it was only when I was an adult that I started engaging with a group of activists for racial democracy in Brazil, that it dawned at me that I wasn't really mixed race, even though biologically, yes, I am. But in my experience of the world, I'm a Black woman. And it was only then that I started opening myself to understanding what that meant in the larger sense of ancestral healing and ancestral identity, ancestral gifts, ancestral pains and woundings. So it started with very political, social activism for racial democracy. And then in my late 30s, maybe, so after, a decade and a half, I then started realizing that there were modalities and there were ways to provide healing to those aspects of my ancestry that needed. So again, it wasn't like, oh, it was here, it started, and that's where everything started. No, first I had to become aware of my Blackness. I had to understand how that fit in my identity as a person. There was a lot of reckoning that I had to do around my own family and the racism in the white part of this family, the silence in the Black side of the family, yeah, all the ways that people with their own wounds and their own traumas inflict that experience in us and inflicted in me for sure. Then it was interesting because as I was already like doing more spiritual work, really diving into this realm of Tantra and Taoism, so looking at indigenous ways of healing from traditions that are not mine, that's then I started understanding, oh, there are routes that I can follow here so that I can really heal the experiences that needs that. Right? Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing so openly and vulnerably about such a tender topic. I mean, I can relate in some aspects because I think the the door opening to the work I currently do, which is supporting, cycle breakers and cycle starters on all levels of their being, including with galactic astrology. It started with healing my racial identity development trauma. So I think I shared with you that my mom is from the Philippines, and then my dad is a light skinned Black guy from the DC area. And so my paternal ancestry is also from West Africa. I have a little Bantu in my DNA, but it's mostly Nigeria and Ghana. And then I have European ancestry as well. And my mom grew up in the Philippines, which was colonized by the Spanish for 400 years and then arguably colonized by the Americans. And so she grew up with a colonial mentality where she was taught that white is right, anything indigenous is primitive or, it's evil, it's the devil, and also anything American is better than anything Filipino. And so I had a lot of anti-blackness that I inherited from both sides of my family actually. And I think I was more connected to my Black identity early on because I was really surrounded by the Black side of my family growing up, and I didn't start healing my relationship with my Filipino identity until I was in my, I don't know, late 30s, early 40s. So it was a gradual journey. There are many layers to this. And it's really tender because I just think ancestral healing in general is very confronting. And so I think for many people, this is not part of their path. This is not the healing work they're going to do in this life because there are many, many ups and downs along this journey. And families are complicated. Like you said, they're bringing their own wounding to every conversation, to different situations. So it's complex. So I just really appreciate you sharing this story with us. I'm curious, how did you get into the work that you're currently doing? Was it through the racial identity healing, or was it another way? Like, how did you end up doing this?
It was another way. It was through my own process of also trying to figure out why was it that I kept falling for the same traps in the relationships that I chose with men.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my mom is a psychotherapist. She's also a yoga teacher. So I grew up with yogic philosophy in the house, and also understanding that we need to take care of our mental health and seeing multiple therapists and always searching for my own understanding of myself and of life. And it was very strange to me that in my 30s, I was still struggling with relationships, that I was still feeling attracted by men that when I look back, I'm like, he had nothing to do with me. What was I doing there? And in that whole process was a moment that I was like, okay, I did all this self developmental work. I did all these courses, all this training. I saw all these therapists, and I'm still struggling with this. The only area that I haven't really focused on is my sexuality. And then I entered the world of Neo-Tantra, first in Brazil, and had a massive Kundalini awakening in one weekend of breath work. And I decided to study more, to learn more, and to understand how perhaps I could heal those anti relational behaviors through my sexuality. And that's where I learned about Layla Martin and started studying with her, taking some of her classes. And it was very clear to me, because of the transformation that I experienced in my life, that I experienced in my sense of self-worthiness and in my sense of deservingness, that I could naturally shift my patterns of relationships. It was very interesting. I wasn't aware that I felt unworthy of love. I became aware of that. I wasn't aware that the fact that I was choosing unavailable men who couldn't commit with me, men who were really traumatized because of their own lives, I wasn't aware that that was inflicting more pain into me. But then, through the work with sacred sexuality, I experienced in my body my divinity. This is very important to say, because I grew up with a mom that shared the yogic view. She was devoted to Paramahansa Yogananda from the Self Realization Fellowship. So I grew up with the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. I grew up with photos of him and altars that my mom had in the house for him as a child. So I remember my mom teaching us that we are an expression of the divine and that other people are the same. So I had that as the baseline of growing up, but I didn't fully feel it. So much so that I felt for traps all the time. And it was through sacred sexuality, opening my body, opening my energetic centers, feeling pleasure to the depths that I was able of feeling, pleasure that I didn't know exist, feeling ecstasy, that I actually became aware of what it is to be one with the divine. I actually had an embodied taste of that. And once I had the embodied taste of that, everything changed. Because then, how can I date this guy who is not committed, who doesn't know love for his own reasons? Like, there was a lot of compassion in my process as well, a heart of compassion opened to all my past partners. But how could I put myself in a situation like that when I realized that no, I'm made of love and I'm worthy of deep love, right? And then that translated in next people I started dating, to meeting the man who is now my husband, to creating a beautiful family. So through my own process, my own transformation, there was a point that I was like, okay, also my work in corporate Brasilia, in Brazil, doesn't make any more sense anymore. I want to be working with people. I want to help people. And at the beginning was only women. I want to help women feel more powerful from this perspective, right? Of like inner power from an embodied place. And I want to do this professionally. So that's where I started venturing into trainings in this area and working as at first as an ontological coach and then a sex, love, and relationship coach, and then always adding on trainings so that I could expand more the depth of what I can hold into trauma healing, somatic experiencing, and currently couples work as well. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that. We actually met through the Vita community, through
Hmm.
Layla Martin's community. So I was in the first cohort in 2017. And going back to, all the content that's in the course, I was able to watch one of your workshops. So I know that you are a very powerful guide. So thank you for saying yes to doing this work. And, all of your clients, including everybody in the Vita community, including Layla, is very, very lucky to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Heather.
Of course. No, you're so talented. Well, so going back to the ancestral healing piece, if you had to put a fine point on it, what would you say are the patterns that you've been breaking in this lifetime?
Yeah. I think the biggest pattern is the pattern of the independent, lonely woman. I have four aunts on my father's side who never got married or you know, um, had long-term partnerships with anyone. On my mother's side, I have, including my mom, women who have always settled for less. Incredible, strong, hardworking, bright women who settled with men who are clearly not the best that they could do in terms of partnership that elevates the couple and the families, right? So what I see is that my pattern of boyfriends and relationship was repeating that. I'm this strong, successful, independent woman. I know what I want. I'm intelligent. And these men all like very mediocre.
Hmm.
So not really a match, not really meeting me as equals. And I don't mean this in a disrespectful way. I mean this as like, what is the balance here, right? I bring this much to the relationship. What are you bringing? And like I'm bringing 100 and someone is bringing 10. That's not a good balance, right? And I decided that that would shift and it would start with me, right? To the point that I did manage to marry a man that is very much here. You know, my husband is a very strong, powerful presence, a very successful, bright, very smart person, very loving, very kind, very generous, very, very, very generous. And not to say that we have a perfect relationship like in this romantic view, but we have a very solid relationship and a relationship that I know is the beginning of a new era for the relationship, for the women in my family. And I do have a daughter, right? And I really don't want my daughter to settle for less. I don't want my daughter to feel unworthy of good love, you know.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing all of that. Uh, I can relate to the piece where you had an awakening through your experience in relationships. And I definitely feel like I did not realize that I felt that I was unworthy of love until having done the Vita work. Honestly, I really had to do the jade egg work, many jade egg sessions of all the different flavors. In a way, I feel like the jade egg kind of defrosted what was stuck and stagnant in my pelvic bowl. And what I've learned from a lot of naturopaths is that stuck energy in this area in our pelvic landscape is can really be related to the maternal line, and what we're carrying in the maternal lineage. And I think one of the patterns that I'm breaking in this life is the middle daughter who stays unmarried and stays home to take care of the parents. I don't know if that's something in Brazil, because I do have an older sister who got married many years ago and all of her children are grown, and I didn't get married until a year and a half ago. And yeah, I had a pattern of just partnering with men who were not a good energetic match, who couldn't really see me, who couldn't really hear me. And a lot of it honestly had to do with my racial identity. And I ended up marrying a man who is also multiracial. He's biracial and black and white. And I didn't know what I was missing. And one of the most precious things, the most precious part of our connection is that I don't have to teach him about the multiracial experience. He understands it, right? So there's no teaching, there's no intellectual, spiritual, emotional labor happening in my home. My home, my relationship is a place for me to relax. And I had only been dating white guys up until then. So that was a huge awakening for me. But yeah, I feel like relationships are a huge portal into spiritual awakening. Could you tell us a little bit about Neo-Tantra? I feel like there is not a lot of understanding around how this field, this modality can support somebody on their healing journey. Can you give us a little overview of what that entails?
Yeah, I would say in very simple terms, we could go on and on about this, but in very simple terms, Neo Tantra is a more, let's call it, New Age spiritual tradition that draws from ancient traditions like Tantra, classical Tantra, even from Taoism, but also from psychology, from modern psychology. And as a spiritual tradition, it invites us to relate to the aspects of ourselves, of our bodies, of our energetic patterns, of our energetic blockages, and use the soma, the body, the living body in its wholeness as a vessel for healing, for liberation, and for expansion. Neo Tantra also includes a lot of sexuality in the way that it promotes healing. And I think that's the main distinction that we need to make around Neo Tantra and classical Tantra, because classical Tantra, yes, if you dig deep enough, you will find sexuality practices deep down in some branches of the lineages, of the more ancient lineages, but it wasn't about that. And Neo Tantra, especially in the West, especially in the United States and Europe, is very much focused on body, on pleasure, on sexuality as a means for spiritual awakening and liberation. Liberation of what? Liberation of the mind, liberation of our misunderstanding that we're not divine, of our misunderstanding that we're separate from anything and anyone. So it's really bringing us back to this understanding that we are one with the divine and that we are all interconnected. And then it uses a lot of cathartic practices that's very much neo-tantric through breath work, sounding, movement, intensity of energy to move those energetic imprints, those energetic patterns and blockages so that we can experience our divine selves. So in very general terms, that's how I see Neo Tantra. And I do think that it's important because I'm also a lifelong student of the yogic lineages. I do have a teacher in the classical non-dual Shaiva Tantra tradition, and it's very different from what we see being discussed and talk about in the Neo Tantra circles. So I like to bring some distinction to these two ways that we can approach these spiritual traditions. Does that make sense what I said?
Yes, yes, thank you. I just learned a lot listening to you. Thank you for explaining that. All right. Well, if somebody wanted to learn more about Neo Tantra, where would you direct them?
Well, first, I would direct them to seek a good teacher, a teacher that is not involved in sexual scandals, in abusing their students. And how do we know that? So we look at their communities, right? When you find a community where people seem to have a healthy enough relationship with their teachers, where there are no weird vibe and secrets and power dynamics where you need to like enter a cult in order to be part of the community, that's a place to start. For me, Leila Martin was an incredible place to start because that same person with whom I had a Kundalini awakening in Brazil is someone who is being charged of multiple sexual assault allegations. So I felt the vibe. I felt the energy. I felt the awakening and the beauty of that while also noticing there's something weird in this community. And then I did my research and found out, no, this is not where I'm going to stay. So I think Leila Martin and the Vita lineage, if we want to call it, and all the people that are coming out of this training and doing incredibly beautiful work in this world with a sense of integrity. So Layla is not involved in any sexual scandals, anything like that. And to my awareness, I don't know of students being also involved in that. So I think that people who carry the Vita training are very good places to start. But there are others. For sure, there are many other teachers, some that I could name here, that also carry a beautiful transmission, a deep transmission with their heart in the right place. And they transmit that through everything that they do and the way that they relate to their communities of students. I also want to say that sometimes people only seek the big names. This is one way of entering these fields, but I am a very relational person. So for me, it makes much more sense to study, with the teacher who has a little studio near my house and has a smaller community and knows my name and knows who I am. I really like that aspect of relationality. And I think that we can be much more intimate with the teachings if we are closer to the teacher as well, right? Like my Kundalini sadhana teacher, he knows about me, he knows my daughter's name, he knows my husband. It's not something super separate, and there's no like, I'm here on this stage and you're my mere student. And I like that. I like that democratic feeling in the student teacher relationship as well. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. So much wisdom there. I remember, I think Layla was the first teacher who told me that, a teacher, an instructor, a guide can have very, very powerful energy and still not be in integrity. So don't be fooled by somebody who, you feel their energetic field. That doesn't mean that they're the right teacher for you or that they're in alignment with themselves, right? That they're in integrity. And so I think that's a really important distinction when you say,
Oh, yes, for sure, for sure. And I think that nowadays we have enough information to sustain that argument, right? There's so many huge names in the yogic field, in the tantric Buddhism field, like the Me Too guru movement
hmm
is a reality, right? And that's where I think that noticing the teacher's community is important as well, not just the teacher. How do the students relate? How do the students relate to the teacher and amongst each other? What is the dynamic there? That tells a lot. That says a lot.
really, really good advice, Marina. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I feel like we should get into astrology now. Are you ready to talk some astrology?
Already.
Okay.
Ready to
Amazing.
learn.
Yay. Okay, fantastic. Well, so for those of you who are new to my work and this channel, I am an ancestral healing guide and most recently a certified quantum soul guidance galactic astrology practitioner. And so I have engaged with astrology for, all of my ancestral healing journey. And the way that I relate to it is that it's not the rule, but it's a tool. And I think it's a really powerful language and framework for understanding and empowering yourself as an energetic being on an ancestral healing journey. And in my Cosmic Awakening Circle membership, we weave together galactic astrology with the somatic work that I learned in the Veda community to, start new cycles. So the jade egg, the crystal egg has been a big part of my journey. I share that with my clients. I share that with folks in the membership. And Galactic astrology is adding an outer layer to all of the planets that show up in our natal charts. And so I'm looking at how your natal planets on the date and time of your birth, how they are in aspect, how they are in conversation with super cosmic points, nebulas, black holes, and fixed stars. And it gives you a larger perspective on your soul's journey over eons of time, right? And so I think it gives us more access to our multidimensional selves. It gives us more access to multidimensional energies. So it's a huge passion of mine, and I'm excited to share what I found looking at Marina's galactic placements with you. Before we jump into that, I just want to talk to you a little bit about your sun, moon, and rising signs because they make up the vast majority of your energetic signature. So you are a Pisces sun, correct? And you are a Gemini moon, and then also you're a Leo rising, which I think makes a lot of sense considering the work that you do. So let's start with the sun. So the sun represents your life force energy. It's where you shine and it's how you see yourself. It's your egoic self. And it's the special sauce that you mix into everything that you do that makes you stand out from the 11 other astrological signs. And each sign is a spectrum of psycho-spiritual energy with a high expression and a low expression. And all of us have all 12 signs in our natal chart, but depending on what house they're in, or if there are a lot of planets in that sign or in that house, they're going to have different influences on our strengths, our areas of growth, our personalities. So your sun is in the sign of Pisces, which is mutable water. And water represents our emotions, our feelings, and our sentiments. So I know right off the bat that you are extremely psychic and intuitive because all of the water signs are very psychic and intuitive. And I would make the argument that Pisces is the most multidimensional. Pisces is the closest to the veil. So, in the high expression, Pisces is very dreamy and romantic and spiritual. I would associate it with just being so compassionate, having the biggest heart in the world. You feel everything. And then the low expression of Pisces is escapism, not having very good boundaries, uh, addiction, just like getting lost in something, like merging with something. And when I tune into this energy of mutable water, it's like water without a container. It's water that seeps into everything it touches. So I'm curious, tell me about this Pisces sun life. How does this show up in your life?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I do feel like I'm very close to the veil. And I have always felt like that. And since very early childhood, I have always been very curious about spirituality and different religions and have studied and being part of different spiritual communities. I do think that, especially in my 20s, my early 20s, I had that very uncontained low and, falling into bad sexual and addictive behaviors and things like that. So it was it was touching that low part. But I feel like as I mature, the more and more I mature, that aspect gets more containment. I don't think that I have poor boundaries at all. It's actually a very strong characteristic of mine to be very clear around my boundaries, sometimes too clear, but I can see how in moments of being really low, that uncontainment shows up for sure. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It's cool to hear everybody's, their personal stories around how these energies show up in their life. The other thing I forgot to mention about the lower expression of Pisces is that it's connected to victimhood as well.
Mm.
Oftentimes, unhealed Pisces will show up like, I can't be a leader, I can't do it, or, everybody's against me, blah, blah, blah. So that's also part of the low expression of Pisces. And your moon is in the sign of Gemini, like I said, which is also mutable like Pisces. So it can be changeable and adaptable, but it's in a different element. So air represents our thoughts, our beliefs, our consciousness. It's mental energy. And the moon represents our emotional core, our emotional inheritance, which includes ancestral wounds, but also the gifts that they've given us. And it also shows us what we are responsible for giving to ourselves in order to feel at home and centered in our own energy. And so I'm a Gemini rising, so I'm very familiar with this energy. Gemini is very curious, very good at speaking and writing, and they love socializing. We can overconsume information. I will say that. Gemini wants to read every book, read every article, watch all the videos, listen to all the podcasts. And when you go too far with that, it really can be too much. You can be overwhelmed in your own mind. And so I would say that unhealed Gemini is in the head primarily, and all of the knowledge that they're consuming doesn't get grounded through the heart and into the body. Okay, so I have a feeling that you do your moon. You're pretty good at taking care of your emotional life. So would you say, though, that your primary way of processing emotions when you were younger was on a mental level?
I don't know. Yes and no. I think there's the cultural aspect of growing up in a culture like the Brazilian one, where we are more in touch with our emotional expression. That is different from what I see here, for example, like from a cultural perspective, really. I do think that I have always had this tendency, and to this day, if you see the amount of books that I have in my office, it's like, seriously? But so there is this tendency of over consuming information, and not just information, knowledge as well, because of that. I call it is an existential curiosity, existential need to make sense of this world. So when I'm passionate about a topic, I wanna learn more, I wanna know more, and sometimes to the extent that is too much, too overwhelming. But I also see my Gemini as this catalyst for my communication and how communicative I am and how I blend in with so many different people, so many different groups. And that has been me from day one, like as a child, and that hasn't changed. How I deal with communication and really reaching out and being in connection with others. I think now, again, as I mature, there are more filters because I think the low side of that was the uncontainment, the lack of boundaries in terms of who is okay to be in my orbit and who is not. And nowadays, that's very clear to me, but it's still a very strong characteristic for sure.
Well, I think one of the gifts of Gemini energy is this ability to connect things that the regular person, the average person wouldn't think have any connection at all. We can see the patterns, right? There's a pattern recognition to Gemini. So, in terms of the ancestral wound, because this is of the mind, this is about communication, there could be a wound around not feeling heard, a wound around expression and communication. But then the gift is when you work on that wound, you become a very skilled communicator. You have a very shining intellect. And I feel like that comes through you very strongly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I noticed that this is in your 10th house of career and what you do in public. So you're very open, right? In expressing what's on your mind, what's on your heart, what's going on in your body. And I think you are signed up to do this in public. You signed up to be a model for other people in that respect. So you're a Leo rising. This is a totally different energy. It's not mutable. It's fixed fire. And fire represents our passion, our creativity, our intuition. And the rising sign is based on your time of birth. So that's why I asked for your birth time. And this is my belief is that you chose this on the other side to come in as this Leo rising because it's the vehicle for your divine mission. It is your perception of reality. It's the lens that you see everything through. And also, it's the energy that people pick up on when they first meet you. So, for the folks out there who aren't that self aware, sometimes the rising sign qualities can be in the shadow and they're not necessarily like negative qualities. You could have really positive qualities that you're not aware of. So I would associate this Leo energy with the archetype of the devoted performer and the entertainment executive, the hostess with the mostess. So you're very passionate and very creative. It's also the heart centered leader. And this is what people pick up on when they first meet you. And there is a Leo growth journey I have found in reading all of these charts. So I will find people on two ends of a spectrum sometimes, where on one end, they are addicted to the spotlight. They have to be the center of attention because they need this external validation for whatever reason. And then I'll also find people who are deathly afraid of the spotlight. They don't want to be the center of attention at all. They avoid it. But at the same time, they're resentful that they're not getting recognition, right? They're mad that they're not being admired for whatever reason. And so I would say the happy medium for both ends of this spectrum between these two extremes is that you find the right stage for you to shine. So you're not addicted to the spotlight, but you're also not running away from it, but also secretly mad that no one can see you, right? So can you talk to me about what that journey has been like for you?
Yeah. Well, I do think that my heart centered leadership has shown very early on, for sure. And when I look back at my career, especially the 14 years that I was in corporate in Brazil, there was that resentment of not being more seen. There was that barrier. I was in a very white, male dominated industry. And as a Black woman, it was a tension all the time. There was this tension between taking up more space and showing more of what I brought up to the company that I worked for and asking for more recognition, and the inability of leadership to first recognize it and second to elevate that and to give me space. And there was a lot of resentment and at times in my downtimes like a victim narrative that would surge for me. But I do think that now that I'm in a field that is more open to what I have to say, to who I am, and that I also have, embodied more of that leadership within myself, I feel more balanced. That doesn't mean that I don't need to also pay attention to the times that it becomes the opposite. My ego is taking too much of the lead. My ego is important in my leadership for sure, but there needs to be a balance there. And I need to keep bringing that to my awareness and to contain, because that certainly shows up at times, especially when I feel very bothered about someone, something that was said or not said, done or not done. And I go deeper. I'm like, oh, it's really about my ego and me wanting to show up more. And then I need to do my own work around containing those aspects to a place of balance, because again, my ego feeds my leadership for sure.
Yeah,
It's
right.
just like how much of that is actually good for me and how much starts being depleting for me.
Thank you for sharing that. That was some Very good embodied wisdom for the Leos out there in the world. Well, so I want to share with you what I found in your galactic placements. Are you ready?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Very
All
curious
right.
about this aspect. It feels like such an amplification of the
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, so whenever I'm looking at somebody's galactic report, one of the first things I do is I scan for certain markers because there are about four different themes, four different galactic life themes that I look for. And you fell into one of these categories, which is very rare. And it's the innovator, change maker, and systems builder. And so my feeling is that you're not just here to create beauty or to inspire beauty, you're here to change how things work. And so, one of the strongest indicators is your midheaven in the sign of Taurus, conjunct Perseus Capulus. And this is your public role, this is your legacy. And the star Perseus is associated with invention, breakthrough thinking, and courageous action, especially when something is stuck or outdated. And so this star system really carries a very sharp initiating energy. And it tells me that you are meant to be visible as someone who introduces new approaches, new structures, or new ways of doing things that challenge stagnation. So you don't innovate for the sake of disruption. You innovate to restore vitality and sustainability and truth. And so your work is meant to build something that lasts, which is very Taurus, but it's not meant to be built in an old way. Your Venus, which speaks to love and money and pleasure, your Venus is in Pisces in the seventh house of relationships, not just romantic relationships. It's like anybody that you relate to as an equal. It's conjunct Arshinar, and this adds another layer to how you do this work of innovation. So, this star is associated with spiritual integrity and alignment with higher principles. And so, with your Venus here, collaboration, partnership, and relational dynamics are central to your path, but only when it is soul aligned. So you're designed to co-create systems and relationships that are rooted in compassion, in ethics. Hello, we were just talking about that, and shared vision. So you cannot thrive in structures that require you to betray your values. That came through really strongly. And then your Neptune, which is the planet of past lives and spirituality, and basically like where we want to merge with the oneness of all that is. Your Neptune is in Sagittarius in the fifth house of children and creativity, and it's conjunct the galactic center, which is a gravitational anomaly. Actually, this new moon in Sagittarius on Friday will be conjunct the galactic center. So, this will be a cool lunar event for you, is my feeling. So, this is a very visionary signature. So the galactic center is a transmission point of cosmic intelligence. So with your planet of spirituality right next to it, your creativity isn't just artistic, it's informational. So you receive insight through imagination, through play, through storytelling and vision. And this is where your innovative seeds are planted. This is where it all begins. And so you're meant to inspire new paradigms through meaning, faith, and expanded perspective, but it's not through force. It's not through controlling other people. And so just looking at these placements that I picked out because they really stood out to me. When I look at them together, I see someone who is here to design new systems rooted in vision, build from integrity rather than fear, and then lead change by embodying that change. So you're not here to fit into existing frameworks, you're here to upgrade these frameworks. And so your chart says that when you trust your inner knowing and allow your creativity to guide your leadership, you become a catalyst. You don't just adapt to change, you initiate it. And this is what makes you a true innovator. So I know that was a lot. That was just the highlight reel because you had a lot going on. How is this landing for you?
It's very inspiring, Heather. It's very inspiring. I think that as you were talking about it, I'm in my mind saying, oh, yeah, this makes sense. Oh, this, and even looking at my like latest innovations in my work, I'm like, oh yeah, it did come first from that place of vision of sitting and channeling and receiving the information and then trusting that that was the creation that I was able to bring to this world and then creating it from that place of connecting with the inspiration, the vision, and also knowing that by doing so, I would be doing something that was very aligned with my sense of ethics, of integrity, and with the paradigm shifts that I want to bring to the field, in particular of this offering on sacred sexuality. And I remember when I was creating and communicating it, it was very clear to me that it was about shifting the narrative and the ways that we perceive what we do in the realms of sacred sexuality. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And yes, to the collaborations needing to make sense and feel so aligned for me. Yeah.
I'm so glad it resonated. And like I said, this is just a slice of what I saw, but I thought this was the most relevant to share with you at this time. I would love to give you a full galactic reading at some point so we can connect about that
Yeah.
offline if you want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to give you an opportunity now to share with us anything that you're excited about, any new projects that you have in store.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited about the new year coming and starting a whole new cycle together. I think that for me, I really like to continue and deepen my work with individuals and couples in somatic, relational somatics, trauma healing, and erotic empowerment. This is one of the core of what I see myself always offering to people. And I invite folks who are looking for a more deep and intimate connection for their healing to learn more about what I do in that realm. And I also love supporting Vita coaches because of my work as a senior teacher on faculty, mentoring Vita coaches who are really serious about this business of helping other people, who really wants to be doing that in service, but also with understanding of deeper understanding of somatics, of weaving trauma informed ways of being with your clients, of deepening your capacity to take people into deep somatic inquiries and transformation. I really like to call in those coaches who are interested in the artistry of it to explore mentorship with me. And I do have a mentorship group program that I offer every year. So the eighth cohort will start in February of the artistry of embodiment coaching. And I invite Vita coaches to check it out. Yeah.
I love it. Well, so if people want to find out more about this program or just learn more about you, where should they go?
Always to my website. That's where I put most of my energy, much less than I put on Instagram, for example. So my website is marinanabao.com. I suppose you're going to share that
Yes, I will.
somewhere, right? And I'm also on Instagram at Marina Nabao. I have to be honest, I have a love-hate relationship with social media.
Mhm.
So I do make sure that I communicate what I'm doing, what I'm offering, what I'm about, my values for this work, but I'm not that social media influencer that is showing up every day, 3 times a day. That's for sure.
I hear you. Neither am I. Well, okay, perfect. So I will put all of that information in the show notes. So before we close today, I have one last question for you that I ask all of my guests. What are the new cycles that you're starting in your lineages in this lifetime?
Oh, that's so clear. New cycles of love, support, deep relationality and ease.
Beautiful. Yes, that came through very clearly. Oh my goodness. Marina, this was such a deep pleasure to be in dialogue with you. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for saying yes to walking this path. I look forward to keeping up with all of your projects. Yeah, you're very, very inspirational. Again, Vita, Layla's very lucky to have you. I'm lucky to know you. And this has been fabulous. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate you, Heather, and I really appreciate your work. It's yeah, I'm still taking in all the things that you shared with me now, and very inspired actually to go further and deeper in this with you later on. Yeah,
Yay. Wonderful. Well, this has been a pleasure, like I said. So, thanks everybody. We will see you next time on the Cycle Starters podcast. Take care. Thanks, Marina.
thank you.